Hello everyone, today's video is all about wealth tax. Will the UK bring in a wealth tax to help cover the cost of the pandemic, which is currently 400 billion? Well, it's been something that's been mulled over by a group of academics for about six to 9 months now, known as the WTC, the Wealth Tax Commission. And they've come up with a proposal to say to the government basically that they should levy a 5% tax on personal wealth for everyone who has assets over 500,000, and that should be spread over 5 years. So it's an interesting idea. Let's explore it some more. So in terms of wealth taxes, in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, well, obviously we're still going through, but since the start of COVID, the only developed nation to have imposed a new wealth tax is Argentina. Argentina has announced a one-off millionaires tax to charge between 1 and 3% to anyone who has assets over about £2 million. And that will raise, they reckon, about £3 billion. Now, or whatever the equivalent currency is over in Argentina. Now, for the WTC, the UK think tank behind the proposed wealth tax over here, they reckon that this 5% levy on assets over £500,000 would bring in something to the tune of £250 billion. That's about 250 billion over 5 years. So that is basically £25,000 being 5% of 500,000, at least £25,000 per individual caught out in this, and they'd spread it over 5 years. So if you're just caught in it, that would be £5,000 a year for the next 5 years. Obviously, those with significantly more wealth, then they'll make a bigger contribution. But that's the proposal from this wealth tax commission. They're saying that this £500,000 threshold, paying a tax on your wealth, would be net of any outstanding mortgages, but it would include equity in your main residence, and it would include the value of your pensions and your businesses and financial assets. And they reckon that this 250 billion that could be raised will come from about 8 million households. So one in 6 households basically would fund this. As a revenue raising measure, that would indeed put in a big dent into the 400 billion or so COVID bill. It's the equivalent of raising income tax from 20 pence in the basic rate to 29 pence, or the equivalent of raising VAT from 20% to 26%. So it's a huge amount of revenue that could be raised by bringing in this wealth tax. So obviously there's a lot of people would say, well, it's not fair. You've worked hard all your life to accumulate wealth after having suffered tax. So it's post tax on your earnings that you've built your nest eggs and your investments. So why on earth should you be taxed again? I suppose it's a similar argument with inheritance tax, double taxation. So the other area that it's unfair, interestingly, is on pensions. So many millions of people have defined benefit pensions, and many millions have defined contribution pensions. I've done separate talks on the types of pensions, but essentially how you value a pension pot is different for both. So if you have a defined benefit pension pot, how it is valued is normally a multiple of the end pension you're going to get, whereas the defined contribution is based on the stock market gains. Now, in most cases, the defined benefit pension is always valued lower than the defined contribution pot for exactly the same income in retirement. So therefore, straight away, it's unfair when you're looking at levying tax on the value of a pension pot. It's unfair for those who have the defined contribution over those who have the defined benefit, because the value of the pot, the deemed value, is always deemed to be higher. So what else would happen? Well, capital flight is the main thing that could happen. I mean, rich people simply would leave the country, and it proves counterproductive. This is how history has shown that these things haven't worked in various places over the years. encourages capital flight and discourages investing. So, and many distortions as well. For example, because they are saying, well, debt would be deductible, so that would then encourage rich people to gear up more, get extra amounts of debt, and invest in assets which would be exempt from a wealth tax, such as farmland, for example. So, you're going to get a lot of people who use these rules to escape having to pay this wealth tax. Now, interestingly, in terms of countries closer to home who have had a wealth tax, Sweden only got rid of theirs about 10 years ago. They had one for about 100 years. France had a wealth tax for several hundred years, and they only abolished that 2 years ago. In terms of who still has wealth taxes in Europe, Norway, Spain, Switzerland, and Belgium still have wealth taxes. It has been thought about in the UK several times before, most notably in the 70s when Dennis Healey was the Chancellor between 1974 and 1979 in the Labour government. And he actually said, he's on the record as saying, we had committed ourselves to a wealth tax. This is the Labour government in the 70s. But in 5 years, I found it impossible to draft one which would yield enough revenue to be worth the administrative cost and political hassle. So they did think seriously about it, but ruled it out. More recently, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak said in July 2020, he said, I do not believe that now is the time or ever would be the time for a wealth tax. So that's what he said in July. But this is such a fast-moving thing and things are changing constantly. Just look at the restrictions for Christmas and the lockdown. So promises with regards to certain taxes could easily be broken, one would assume. So don't rule out the government at least mulling over a wealth tax again and bringing it in. And certainly if it can raise that kind of money that the Wealth Tax Commission Group are suggesting, politically, you could see them thinking about this, because like I've said in other videos, some of the tax raising measures currently talked about, like increasing capital gains tax to align it with income tax, will only raise a few billion, not hundreds of billions. So, and again, if the Conservatives are going to stick to their election manifesto of not raising the headline rates of income tax, VAT, and national insurance, then this is something that doesn't break the election promises. They never talked about a wealth tax in that 2019 election manifesto. So, wealth tax coming to the UK. Who knows? Watch this space. But if you like this video, please do subscribe here, and I will see you soon.